Welcome in to TFW Live, the best secret in fantasy football. I am Big Savvy. I'm joined here by my best friends, Johnny and Austin. Of course, Whisper Nation. What is going on? Shouting out to Whisper Nation, all the guys in the chat here, and those that will be coming up soon after that as well. We got Anthony, Albert, Freak Stomp, and all of these guys that are going to be pouring in as well. And if you want to be the latest member of Whisper Nation, like these guys we're about to shout out here, then you can hit that subscribe button and follow us on all the platforms that are listed in the description as well. So we'll shout out these newest members. Got to get them up here. Christopher Mazur, Siga248, Lithium66, NFL Outdated, Uriel Yuki Klein, Face Off Sports, Steffi Smalls, Sniper1341, got to be real, Yodel, T.O. So we appreciate everybody there. And, of course, on today's episode, we're joined by a very special guest, Pat Kerrane. You know him from his work over at NBC Sports Edge and the Ship Chasers podcast. And if you haven't yet, be sure to follow him on Twitter, at Pat Kerrane, which is right there on his description. It's also in the description of the video as well. What is going on, Pat? Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Tell the people what you're working on lately. I know you guys are working on the draft kit, right?
Yeah, the draft guide, which should be out pretty soon. I think it, kind of the end of June. The draft guide magazine should be out. So I've been working on rankings for that, redraft rankings, dynasty rankings update, which is also on the premium side of our site. Also, just a bunch of articles, team previews, player previews, all that good stuff.
Awesome. We'll get some of the particulars out of the way and talk a little bit about you, man. We've got a rapid fire questionnaire here to start the show off. Wanted to ask you so Whisper Nation get to know you a little bit better and just kind of what you're into here. So if you don't mind, we'll rock through these here. So do you root for your NFL team or your fantasy team more?
I don't have an NFL team, right? I'm a true
perfect.
fantasy.
There you go.
Wow.
Whoa! Why would I root for an NFL team? We're playing fantasy here.
All right.
I meet the most unbiased analyst I've ever met, man. I've never met one that hasn't had a team. That's awesome. What year did you start playing fantasy football?
I think 99. It was like a league where it was the dumbest scoring settings where I think it was like they got like a quarter point or a half point per carry. So like Eddie George.
PPC?
Yeah. It was crazy. So like Eddie George was averaging like 3.8 yards per carry that year in a Jeff Fisher offense. They're just like slamming him into the line, and he was a superstar. So like my perception of like what fantasy football was and how you win was like so absurdly skewed by this league.
Oh my God.
That's awesome.
That's pretty good. Trent Richardson could have used that sophomore season.
Oh yeah. He would have been awesome.
Favorite fantasy football player of all time, Pat?
I mean, LaDainian Tomlinson, I feel like, was the guy in that era. And I just remember, like so just wanting the one-on-one so bad and, not getting it. And you're just like, what's the point?
Yeah. You had to play with during the Priest Holmes days too, as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I love Priest Holmes. Yeah. I was on the Swolecast and giving Kitchen a little, I was saying Priest Holmes is had a better career than Derrick Henry, just to needle him. I mean, but come on, what a career Priest Holmes had.
So least favorite player of all time is Derrick Henry, then? No.
Well, only if I'm on the Swolecast.
What is a sound or noise that you love?
I do like a you're on the clock notification that isn't jarring.
Ooh.
DraftKings could really work on that. They pause whatever you're playing and blast you in the ear. I don't like that very much. I don't really like a really loud "you're on the clock." Could do without that. Just a nice subtle notification.
You ever drafted on NFL.com? Because they have Goodell. That's their "you're on the clock." They actually say "you're on the clock."
You're on the clock.
Yeah. So
everyone starts booing.
Yeah.
Hey, Travis got caught during a meeting when we were having a league meeting, and he was mock drafting, and we heard it. We heard that Roger Goodell come up.
He got exposed by Goodell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're supposed to be bylaws, man.
He does that.
Goodell does that.
Yeah.
Pat, favorite swear word?
Are we cursing on this?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Fuck is obviously the best.
Okay.
I mean,
It's been 3 for 3 so far.
Yeah.
So we're good. I don't know if there's a better one. So. What are the most leagues you played in at one time?
I mean, last year we were in. I think we had like 14 high stakes leagues, and I'm always in too many dynasty leagues. I probably was in like 14 or 15 of those.
Do you sell off a bunch of dynasty leagues though? Like, do you end up having?
I never have, but I probably should soon. As I keep joining, like I took over this year. I did a startup. We did some ship chasing startups, and then I took over an orphan in the Roto World League. So I added to, like, the plan is always to not add any, and then you like add 2, and you're like, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
I was thinking about cookies at the end of the night too.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Most exciting fantasy football moment.
Yeah, I remember like I remember kind of the bad stuff more. Like I remember when Fred Jackson was I had this incredible team, like the best team I'll ever have. I drafted Gronk and Jimmy Graham together in the same year that they broke out.
Ooh.
And John Paulson's ranks, by the way, got me on those guys. So shout out to 4for4's John Paulson back in 2011. But then that team lost Fred Jackson on Thanksgiving. I remember being at my grandmother's house and realizing I probably wasn't going to win it without Freddie.
Some pretty devastating injuries on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
man.
Thanksgiving's always
Yeah.
It can be a bummer. Favorite game day beverage?
Well, it used to be an IPA, and then I got into the sours. But I'm covering games now on Sunday, so it's like
You can't drink.
It's like a LaCroix.
Yeah, we can't.
Yeah.
You can't admit that you drink. It's a LaCroix. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do. So the playoffs are better because I can have a couple beers during the playoffs because like the playoff schedule, I don't have to blurb the game. I just have to know what happened, and then we'll do like a recap kind of podcast that's pretty loose. But after the Sunday games, I do a recap podcast where I interview everyone who covered the games, and it's like got to be really tight. Yeah, game by game, and I'm responsible for keeping it a certain length. So like,
and then you have your own games too, right?
Like, I have my own games that I have to do solo, and that's already like you can mess up a solo pod pretty quickly. So yeah, you can't really show up tipsy. That it would be nice, but I can't.
Boneless or bone in on your wings?
I mean, they're not wings if they don't have bones. So
Wow.
I mean, I guess
coming for the chicken nugget squad.
Yeah,
I mean, I like chicken nuggets as much as the next guy, but if the question's about wings, they should probably have bones.
All right. Kickoff is in 2 minutes. You're still deciding your flex. Do you go with your gut or your weekly rankings?
So I guess the way I would normally decide that is like kind of my gut, but I would like think about it like, what does this team need? Like, what's the matchup? Like, I would kind of go through that. Like, I'm already being forced to start this running back who's he's like it's JD McKissick or whatever. Like, I know he's not going to smash. So I really need to swing for the fences with this flex. That's probably how I'd go through it.
I like it. All right, so this last one's kind of it's like our guest question. It's tailored towards you, but I'm gonna have the other guys answer first. On Ship Chasers, we heard Pete say that Sky Moore has the best fucking name he has heard for a wide receiver ever. We wanted to know who else, or current or past, you think has a great name for fantasy football. Austin, I'll start with you.
I got 2. First one is Cooper Kupp. I think his dad was spot on when he said, you know what name would sound really good coming out of a loudspeaker? Cooper Kupp, and he was right. The other one I got to throw out there is Bo Jackson. Mainly, well, it's awesome, but it was also my pseudonym when I was doing some tracking activities back in 2014 was Mo Jackson. It was based off of Bo Jackson. So if I ever needed to go to an event and I didn't really want people following up with who I was, it was Mo Jackson. So that's those are my 2.
Ronald says Ocho Cinco, although he changed his name to Ocho Cinco, so I don't know if that technically counts.
Hey, it's
Johnny. What about you?
I would have to go, actually, speaking of Ocho Cinco, not Chad Ocho Cinco himself, but his at one point, his receiving mate, TJ Hushmanzada. That is just a fun name to say. I never had him on any of my rosters, unfortunately, but I do like the name.
All right, Pat, bring us home here.
I'll go with Albert Okwegbanam, who everyone refuses to even say the guy's name. But I literally went and looked up a video of him saying his name because I was like, I'm sick of not saying.
Well,
this
you know
man's
what?
name.
You say it differently after that video than I've heard anybody who actually has the balls to say it. Like, it doesn't sound like they say it right.
Can you say it one more time?
I believe it's Okwegbunam.
Because it's a big part of this show, and mine personally speaking, to get people's names on the tee. And it's actually a pet project I want to develop, to have like a set of Instagram reels where we get every single NFL player just to say their own name, because it's really hard.
I would love that. Yeah.
Like when Heineke, and you're just like,
well, Najee. I loved when Najee did it. Najee was like, everyone keeps saying Najee, and he's like, it's Najee. And I was like,
Tyrod
oh,
Taylor,
glad you
Tyrod
said that.
Taylor,
Right.
CJ Uzomah.
Yeah.
He actually did a video.
Oh, really? Where he
It was
pronounced
a funny video. Yeah. He had some fun with it.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll get into some news and notes here, and we'll go through the panel and talk a little bit about it. It'll be interesting to see if Pat was actually responsible for blurbing some of this stuff. But we've got the first one on the docket here. Saquon Barkley expects to be more involved as a receiver this season. Pat, we're about to see Saquon at his lowest price since ever. So are you buying into his role in the offense? Are you buying in Saquon, kind of fluke injury last year, stepping on that other player's foot?
I'm mostly buying. Yeah. He's in a really rich area of the draft where, like, I love T. Higgins. I want to make bets on AJ Brown. Like, there's lots of guys in that range that I think are really good picks. But I do like, a third round Saquon Barkley sounds like something we should be targeting. And I think they're going to be passing a lot more. That's a pretty safe bet. I don't believe that Daniel Jones will be like good this year. I think Daniel Jones is just not good. Like, I don't, coaches are important, but it's a quarterback. Like, he's either good or he's not, So I don't really like, I'm having a hard time getting like fully optimistic about the Giants, but I think there should be some value there. And Matt Breida is the backup. I feel like Barkley could pretty easily just play 80, 85%, 90% of the snaps. They gave Devin Singletary 100% of snaps in a playoff game. Brian Dable did. So that part's pretty exciting. It's not a super valuable backfield, but he gets everything. And I thought at times he looked like vintage Saquon Barkley last year. He obviously didn't have a great year, but there were some really nice runs, and he had some breakaway runs. And so I'm not like, I don't believe that Saquon's like washed.
I'm with you on that. I think he's a huge value this year, so it'll be fun to see where that ADP kind of winds up when we start drafting in August. Moving on here, we've got Gus Edwards, ACL. He was held out of Ravens voluntary OTAs. So was J.K. Dobbins. Austin, they also brought in Mike Davis. So are you worried yet, or is this just kind of the rumblings early on, and we'll be okay by the time training camp runs around?
I think he's going to be all right overall. I am just concerned about the Baltimore backfield, generally speaking, because of how much a committee orientation it has been and continues to be. And I think that Gus Edwards is one of the most underrated players out there, but I still do hold my breath of what he would do with a larger workload coming in. So I'm a little concerned about the overall backfield from fantasy purposes, but not really concerned too much about Gus Edwards and his recovery from the ACL.
Well, speaking of large, DeAndre Swift, the Detroit Free Press reports that DeAndre Swift looks bigger this summer. And in related news, Johnny grew half an inch when he read this headline.
That's right, dude. I am so jacked on this. Have you seen those photos? My boy looks so good. Woo!
I actually wanted to ask you, like, how much do you buy it? I remember CMC a couple years ago looked bulked up. They did the Mike Davis, like, looking jacked. These pictures, aesthetically, they look great for your running back. You want to be like a bell cow, but do you buy into these these running backs bulking up?
Well, not really. It's more about like what the coaches are going to take from it. I think, like, if the coaches feel better about using him at the goal line now, awesome. But like, I don't think DeAndre Swift's really good, and I think he's probably got like a 15-pound range at which he can be really good. Right. Maybe at the high end of that range, he's going to be a little less dynamic, but maybe better at the goal line or something, and gets a few more goal line carries. So I think it's probably mostly noise.
Right. Moving on, we're going to talk about Kareem Hunt. The Cleveland Plain Dealer reports that the Browns have not had substantive talks with the contract year running back Kareem Hunt. Johnny, when you look at Kareem Hunt, the news was maybe he'd be dealt, maybe he'd be cut. He's kind of in this scenario, but it looks like he's probably staying put. How do you feel about the backfield in Cleveland?
I really hope that he does end up going to another team, so that way we can really see Nick Chubb fully unleashed. But again, I think he'll probably end up there when all said and done, and it's probably going to be a lot similar to what we've seen. It will be interesting. He is okay, so he's that borderline RB2, right? But with Deshaun Watson, say potentially for half the season, does Cleveland's run game may become more intriguing when Deshaun comes back, because it would indicate that you'd probably have Hunt in the backfield a little bit more?
Are you asking me? I mean, for me,
well,
like, I think that Hunt, well, if you look at Deshaun over his history, he's not targeted the running back too much. So if we're already like lowering the targets, that's where I think, it's more of a contingency thing with Hunt, even though he's kind of defined a role. But then again, I don't know, like, I guess I'd be open to being talked into it because they don't have a lot of weapons there. So, I mean, maybe he does carve it out. We'll move on to another Cleveland Brown, though. Here, a source tells the Cleveland Plain Dealer that the Seattle Seahawks would likely sign Baker Mayfield if he was released by the Browns. Austin, this kind of makes like a lot of sense, obviously. That's why we think he hasn't been dealt.
I think that my stance on Baker is the same one that it's been. They need to work with Baker. Both sides need to come together, put all their cards on the table and say, look, Baker, we loved you at one point. We're moving on. We're trying to get rid of you. We're trying to make a deal happen. People are just not interested with what they have currently seen last from you. So, hey, we're going to do something that works for both of us. We're going to go ahead and have you start out our season because we expect a suspension for Deshaun Watson. This is going to give you, Baker Mayfield, a chance to showcase what you're really about now that you're healed up. Our team is improved. You can come in here, make the most of this situation, set our team up well for Deshaun Watson to come in, take over, hopefully have a head start to get us into the playoffs, and then you get to come off 6, 8, 9 games, whatever that suspension ends up being, showing other teams what you're capable of, and then we will work with you to find a team you want to go to, and we'll make that happen. I think that these two sides having little pissing matches and trying to have an egotistical rundown on this is hurting both of them. It makes a lot of sense if you're asking me, given where it seems the climate is for Baker and where Baker's climate is out himself and the future plans of the Browns. This to me seems like the most logical path. I hope that they can all take a moment to breathe and come together and do what's best for the fans of Cleveland.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Another franchise with some quarterback questions here is Miami. Tua Tagovailoa expects more downfield passing opportunities this season. Pat, this has been like one of the biggest ones, biggest offense I've looked at is like curious because of all the changes that they've had and with the new coordinator or the new head coach coming in with Mike McDaniel. How do you feel about Tua and this offense? And, we're drafting obviously Tyreek Hill high, Jalen Waddle, kind of the situation going on in there in Miami.
I'm pretty optimistic about the offense, but I'm not that optimistic about Tua because I don't think he's going to have a ton of rushing upside this year. And like just kind of what we've seen from Jimmy Garoppolo is like we know that San Francisco can support a lot of weapons, but won't necessarily make the quarterback a fantasy star. And Tua is somewhat similar to Garoppolo. He's very accurate. He doesn't really challenge downfield, but he can throw downfield. And I don't feel like he's, someone who's like can only throw short or has like a problem where he refuses to throw downfield because, they're using Waddle in this really low ADOT role and he didn't really have any downfield weapons last year. I mean, Devontae Parker is not really like his style of downfield weapon. And the offensive line last year was horrendous. It was horrible at pass blocking. It was horrible at run blocking. Like, he's definitely not like Ryan Fitzpatrick or whatever. He's not like going to challenge downfield as like his first instinct. But I do think he'll, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, really smart scheme and better offensive line play, I think he'll take his shots. But I don't think this is going to be like, the Bruce Arians type of offense where they're throwing downfield as like a core part of what they do.
Right. I mean, so much last year, they were high in pass attempts last year. Miami was one of the league leaders in pass attempts. And then you look at San Francisco, they're one of the bottom teams in pass attempts. So I'm just wondering what we're going to get because McDaniel, yes, comes from San Francisco, but that this team was like ingrained in them last year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Moving on to another piece about running backs weight here. The Athletics' Mark Kabelis reports that Najee Harris is up to 244 pounds. I thought it was funny because Then Najee responded to someone on Twitter and said, "Brah, I weighed 240 last year. Reporters really don't be knowing nothing, just be tweeting shit." So
yeah, dude.
Whether or not Najee is actually 244, Johnny, are you excited about Najee as you are DeAndre Swift?
I think he's going to be a top 5. I mean, the system dictates that he's going to be barring injury, he would be a top 5 guy, top 10 guy. So I think he's one of the safest running backs. So that's where his appeal majorly comes to me this year. But I did think that this was really interesting because once again, you look at it and you're like, you raise your eyebrow and you're like, wow, that's a lot of weight. And then for him to be like, oh, no, I did play at 244. That's a big boy. I didn't realize he was that big.
Yeah. I mean, and he's not exactly like he had a great season last year, volume wise. He didn't exactly look like the best running back. So we'll see what happens, like what meeting we get there. Sticking with the Steelers here, Deontay Johnson. Well, he was first reported not to at Steelers OTAs. Then he went to OTAs. So I guess I want to frame this in a dynasty light, Austin. Are you like with new quarterback in? Obviously, they drafted the wide receivers. Where are you at with Deontay Johnson? Are you kind of holding him or are you trying to get out of Deontay?
I just on a gut level with it, I think Deontay Johnson is really talented. I do think he benefited from Ben Roethlisberger's play style of last year. If you could get a premium price on Deontay Johnson, I'd be eager to take that. It would have to be a premium price because I do believe in Deontay Johnson. I think he's really good. I think he still is the top dog over there. But if you can get someone biting in at that top value for him, I would Deontay Johnson or otherwise, I'd say consider that. In this specific case, if you can trade hype for substance, I do that. And I'm concerned there's a little bit more hype surrounding Deontay Johnson because of the relationship he had with Big Ben, one that we just can't guarantee with a new quarterback behind center and the new additions, as you mentioned, coming into the Steelers wide receiver room.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Pat.
I think he's one of the most overvalued players in Dynasty. He's treated like he's this, like young star, but he's going to be playing with a rookie quarterback. They just added Pickens. Claypool is good and might be moving to the slot potentially for some snaps because Pickens is not going to play in the slot. So you could have maybe Claypool getting targeted at a higher rate, which would really hurt Johnson because that's kind of his thing. And then let's say he has like an okay year. Now he hits the free agent market. So you gotta play that game. So Johnson sets you up in Dynasty where you have to be right. Like he has to be good with a new quarterback and difficult target competition to maintain the current valuation. And then he also probably has to sign with a team that we like because the Steelers have generally let their wide receivers walk outside of like Antonio Brown. They let them go. So that's a lot of risk. There's like a ton of risk with Deontay Johnson. He's not priced like that. He's priced like he's one of the safest assets that you can get. And I completely disagree with that.
So you think it's going to be switched over? You don't believe in Mitch Trubisky either?
No, I don't believe in Mitch. I think Pickett starts 17.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like with the capital, they probably have to start Pickett, right? Like, you don't take him in the first round.
And the archetype, like you took the pro-ready guy, like and everyone else went third round, I guess. So maybe there was like a bigger discrepancy between these guys in the NFL's eyes than we thought. But I don't know if you're taking Kenny Pickett and like he's seen generally as a pretty low ceiling NFL quarterback, but who's ready right now and he's fifth year guy, he can step right in. And then you don't play him right away. That seems just kind of like a waste.
Yeah. Moving on to another wide receiving room. Well, this news is mostly about Jerry Jeudy here. The Arapahoe County District Attorney's Office has filed a motion to dismiss second-degree domestic tampering charges against Jerry Jeudy. We got some technical difficulties here, but Jerry Jeudy is having these charges dismissed. Austin, how are you feeling about Jeudy here? Obviously, this year is good, and then this wide receiving room in general with Russell Wilson coming to town.
I hope everybody who's involved in this situation is healthy and safe and moving on to better moments in their lives. With that said, this has no effect on my evaluation for Jerry Jeudy coming in. I'm excited to see what Russell Wilson and a more offensively focused Denver Broncos can do for all of their playmakers, Jerry Jeudy included.
All right, Patrick Mahomes told reporters at OTAs that he expects his wide receiver targets to be more spread out in 2022. So Johnny, maybe we're at the point where we've been asking, is it MVS? Is it Sky Moore? Is it Juju Smith-Schuster? Maybe it's just the answer is no. And it's just going to be this, everybody's going to eat into each other, and we're not going to have one guy, outside of Kelsey. How do you feel about the wide receiver room in Kansas City?
I think it just you want to take your dart throw, right? You want to at least grab one of these guys, because that just signifies to me that that they don't necessarily have it set at who is going to be that kind of funnel, target funnel. I do still like Juju there. I think he's a very talented wide receiver. I think that, 2 years ago, he's still really young, and seeing that 2 years ago, he was one of the best in the league. We'll see what he can now do with Pat Mahomes. But I do think that, there are going to be weeks where Mecole is going to be a great matchup. There are going to be, weeks and it's inevitable that MVS is going to catch, a couple bombs on one of the weeks. So he'll be startable at one point. So, yeah, I just kind of want to get a piece of this offense. Sky Moore could also have a.
I want to do a little experiment here with everybody on the panel. I want everybody to plant their flag on one receiver not named Kelsey to stand out. So, Johnny, go ahead. Who do you think it's going to be?
Juju.
Okay, Austin.
I'm going Mecole.
Okay, Pat.
Sky Moore.
So that first, it was a perfect setup. I think that's where we're at. Everybody and I think, Johnny, you put it well. If I'm in best ball, and maybe Pat, you could speak to this. I'm exposing myself to all the different ones, especially when they come up as a value. But are you all in on Sky Moore? I mean, I know you love Sky Moore, Pat, but is that?
I'm not all in. I mean,
okay.
I feel like the best ball community is conspiring to make sure I don't go all in, and it's nice of them. Diversification is a good thing. But his ADP is a little high. It's a little high. He's going above Garrett Wilson. He's not a better prospect than Garrett Wilson.
You're getting uncomfortable now drafting.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. I do still take him. I just don't take him in every draft like I might have. So, and also MVS. I think to me MVS, if I kind of remove my bias, is the best one. I mean, you're getting him a few rounds after Sky Moore. You're getting him way after Juju. And
he has the most money.
He has the most money, and he's signed past this year. Juju's on a 1-year prove-it deal. Right. I mean, he's the guy that they might actually be interested in installing as a key part of their offense. And he's not going to be a classic number one receiver, but they need someone to be able to take the top off defenses. That was a crucial part, and it won't be maybe as important since they're not going to be able to directly replace Tyreek Hill because he's not replaceable. But I think that getting him as if he's not a key part of the offense when he very much could be is a really nice value.
All right, we're going to move to New Orleans, where Jameis Winston is moved with a visible limp during last week's OTAs. Austin, when we looked at this headline, then we dug a little bit deeper into of course he's got a limp, right? It's not like he's out there. I mean, he just tore it in October, I think it was, week 7. So, how are you thinking the limp is a big deal here, or are you thinking that he's just kind of rushing to come back? Or
I'm not stoked about a limp. I don't know in what world that's okay. I mean, even when we laugh about Adrian Peterson's pimp limp running 70-yard tutties for the Washington football team, I think at the time, no, dude, I'm not feeling awesome about a limp.
Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Well, the question, I think this is the question regarding the Saints right now is, are you guys drafting Taysom Hill in the 18th round on underdog where he has tight end eligibility?
Ooh. Oh,
well, you think
that's actually...
don't they have Dalton? You think
they do have Dalton? Yes, yeah. They do have Dalton.
So, I think they'd probably go to Dalton with the defensive coach.
But what if they don't?
Sean Payton?
Sean Payton is gone.
Yeah, 18
round 18. Who do you really like?
Go do it. Yeah, I'm not going to poo-poo you, but
it's better than Julian Edelman.
It's a defense.
That's right.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
Be careful with news articles coming out on April 1st.
Yeah,
especially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Still in New Orleans, though, to Chris Olave, Saints assistant general manager Jeff Ireland said that wide receiver Chris Olave said he reminds me of some players who have played in our league, the Marvin Harrisons, who were just silky smooth and effortless. Pat, I know that you haven't been the highest on Chris Olave. The opportunity, kind of seemed there than Jarvis Landry. Obviously, we got the Michael Thomas debacle. Where are you at with Chris Olave coming into 2022?
I'm not as high as some others, and like he goes ahead of Garrett Wilson by a couple picks now in best ball drafts, and I'm happy to take Wilson after him. I think Wilson is a better prospect, but Olave had a very good career. I guess like the thing with the 4-year players, like it is tough for me to get too excited about a guy who returned to school, and I think the thing is that it's like, he wouldn't have gone where he went in the NFL draft if he had come out last year, right? Because otherwise he would have come out. So that's really why, the early declare stuff matters so much, is that like, yeah, the Saints trade up for him and, give the world for him, but they needed that 4th college season to get there with that level of excitement. And that historically has been a pretty big red flag, but that's not to say that he can't be like a good NFL player. I was comping him to Emmanuel Sanders. Like, I think he's probably that type of guy where he's like a really good number 2 wide receiver. And ultimately the bar that what we want for fantasy is like absurdly high. Like what we're asking for these prospects when they come in, we want them to be fantasy superstars. We're like, it's not good. I don't care if you're the best receiver on your team. That does nothing for me. I need you to be like a top 5 actual NFL receiver in the league. So my process is that I'll sometimes miss low on a guy like Chris Olave potentially, with the goal of like capturing the superstars is at least what I tell myself. But yeah, I'll probably be a little bit lower than Olave, but I'm not like out. Like, I don't think he's a bad pick in best ball. I don't think he was like a bad prospect or anything. I think he'll be good.
And so I've heard it kind of tossed around that he came back for the 4th year due to COVID. And so we've talked a little bit about like kind of the structure of COVID and how that's affecting kind of draft capital and things like that. Do you think that has any play here, or do you going to strictly try to still go by history and the numbers here?
Well, that would work more for me if he hadn't then been inefficient as a senior and outplayed by a sophomore in Jackson Smith and Jigba and a junior in Garrett Wilson. That would, if he came back and had like a Devontae Smith season, and then it was like, yeah, you really didn't need to come back, and then you showed everyone, I would feel a bit different about it.
I see. All right, well, we'll move on here to DK Metcalf. Pro Football Focus's Brad Spellbegger says projects Metcalf next contract to be 5 years, $130 million. Johnny, we know DK is probably not going to, like, would you bet that he's going to stay with the Seahawks to get this deal? It doesn't look like that, right? And then where are you at with kind of the wide receivers in Seattle this year?
I mean, I don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback as of right now. Is it Drew Lock? Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be Geno Smith? Like, I know that they do have confidence in Drew Lock. Like, there are a lot of rumblings that they really did want Drew Lock. Again, there are signs pointing that DK would be the more beneficiary for that type of quarterback. But again, if it's Baker, could be a different story, because then you're looking at probably a little bit more of Lockett being involved in that kind of game plan to me. So I think it's going to be like a, ear to the ground kind of thing, and hearing and waiting to see if Baker lands there, as to ultimately where I like or who I like more this year. But I do think DK is a buy low right now if you're in Dynasty, because I do think that there is going to be a team that will pay him if Seattle does, trade him, or Pete Carroll ends up leaving, and then they can open up this offense and get a alpha like DK and more involved.
I can't believe Seattle traded Russell Wilson. I'm still so what were you doing? Anyways, we'll move on to another mind-boggling headline here. Antonio Brown said, the headline is just everything here. Interviewed during a fan-controlled football game. Okay. Free agent Antonio Brown said of his chances playing in the NFL in 2020. Nah, don't play yourself. Looking at me to play. Austin, just speak on Antonio Brown a little bit.
For the brand, baby.
Yeah,
for the brand.
Money.
As our boy Matt Poffin, aka Fat Motvin, guest of the show, you see him here, as he likes to say, Antonio Brown is no longer a football player. Antonio Brown is an entertainer. And so what do I think of this headline? For the brand.
For the brand.
He's going to build up hype, come back. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And again, it's going to be for the brand.
Yeah, exactly. Irv Smith here. When we were speaking about Irv Smith, Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell said he's ready to absorb all of this and be in the position to play fast, go play with a bunch of confidence, that he's going to be a major part of what we do. Pat, I want to talk about the Vikings because I think they're kind of under the radar a little bit. And with this new transition, Kevin O'Connell, do you see some real upside? Obviously, Justin Jefferson, but in the offense as a whole, being better than expectation this year?
Yeah, I do. I definitely think there's upside. One thing looking at the Vikings last year is they didn't run a ton of routes. Like if you just look at how many routes were out there on any given play, like the Vikings are kind of one of the lower ones, and the Rams are among the league leaders. So the tight end is running a route, the running back is running a route. They're not staying into block, right? And so if you just think about that, Zimmer's calling max protect,
right?
That's not helping. So it's not even just about how many passing plays there are and about the Vikings last year, they only passed when they had to pass. They weren't passing in situations that were actually going to set up the passing game to succeed. They were turning to the passing game when other things hadn't succeeded, which sets the passing game up to fail. So I think there's just so many kind of small ways that they can tweak the offense to create edges for the passing game, in addition towards just calling more passes. And I think they will be kind of a balanced offense, kind of like the Rams, where we see them as a pass first but not pass heavy team, kind of like the Rams, kind of like Dallas, one of those types of teams. I expect we'll see the Vikings kind of in that tier, but coming from the Vikings, which are kind of like Seattle-esque in their play calling tendencies, that's a pretty big shift. So I wasn't drafting Adam Thielen much last year, which I probably should have just because of his touchdown role. But I'm more open to Irv Smith, Thielen, Osborne, throwing in those guys on stacks. If I have Jefferson and making a stack out of it is more fun this year than it was last year for sure, and I'm doing it more.
Sounds good. We got George Kittle, who is missing OTAs, and he's expected to miss the rest of them with a lower body injury. Austin, are you concerned about Kittle here? Not just with the injury, but we're moving to Trey Lance as well. I know we've drafted him a bit in best ball, but how do you feel about managed leagues, redraft, that kind of situation?
Not good, my dude. But we're playing fantasy football and let it ride. And I think that George Kittle might be the most high ceiling tight end in the NFL today, just given the way he is. He's a fucking animal, dude. He loves football. It's so obvious. He hurts himself all the time because of how he plays, and then he rushes to get back and go do it to himself again. I love George Kittle. He's one of my favorite players, if I'm honest, but he gets hurt so often, and he doesn't seem to have a lot of regard for these injuries. I don't see people who have suffered a lot of injuries get older and then continue to play the way they played and get hurt less. And so, I'm concerned, but in best ball where I can get him, I like the upside. I like him. I think his upside is higher than anybody's just based on who he is. But if he keeps deteriorating, so will his points.
Dude, he's giving me major Jordan Reed vibes. I hate to say it, but it's not as
he's bad. A rich man.
And he's hit a ceiling that Reed never hit. But I'm just saying, that's what the vibes I'm picking up.
Don't you put that bad juju on him, man?
Yeah,
that's bad. How dare you?
We're going to move on to Christian Kirk and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence said from a football IQ sense, I think Christian Kirk is really quarterback friendly. Johnny, it's happening. They've already paid him a bunch of money. The hype is building around Christian Kirk. Get on the hype train now while you can, Johnny.
It's just Office Space, hey, Peter, what's happening? That's how I feel like this has come through here. I get a lot of people are super jacked about Christian Kirk going to going there, but I'm not maybe it is a little bit that I've watched him, and I do think he's a solid receiver. Don't get me wrong, but do I think that he is going to be a guy where you're going to consistently want to put him in your lineup week in and week out? And I don't think you are. And so I think that the hype is just getting a little bit too much because he did get this massive contract and all of these things. But again, it's Jacksonville. And I don't know how many times you're going to really want to throw Christian Kirk in your lineup based on a matchup or feeling good about, anything that the Jaguars are doing this year.
I just got to throw in I got to throw in this 1 point on the Christian Kirk side because it's one of my end of season in my fantasy diary notes that I threw in however many years ago. And it was from Michael Crabtree with the Baltimore Ravens. Just because you got a guy in the wide receiver 1 spot doesn't mean you got yourself a wide receiver 1. It's not like the running back position where the opportunity is still going to net you points. Even if you're that number 1 dog at the wide receiver spot, it does not mean you're going to finish with a ton of fantasy points. So just keep that one.
He's probably going to be playing the slot, and so it's like you don't want. If anything, you would want the outside guy for Doug, because that's like the Alshon role, to go up and get it. But like that's not who Christian Kirk is. So it's like he's a slot guy. So it's just I'll stay away.
I think he could end up being like early Cleveland era Jarvis Landry or something.
You think so?
I think he could, but I mean, he wasn't particularly fun to start, but he racked up, he had like
22
200
share or something like that.
Yeah, I think he was like 13.4 points per game in his first year in Cleveland. I think he could get there, but I'm not excited about him either. It's just more like he feels like the type of guy that there's gonna be a bunch of pieces next offseason that was like Christian Kirk was wide receiver 26 last year.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but I never started him.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
I feel like he's gonna be constantly in our Sunday morning lineup shows, like this guy or Kirk, and I'm gonna be constantly like that guy. It doesn't matter. Like fill in the blank here. Pat, I wanted to pitch this one to you. Okay, so over the last 2 seasons, we've seen these wild headlines that have turned into just bullshit in the season. So a couple years ago, it was Justin Jefferson couldn't win against press coverage. Like he couldn't win against man coverage. He was going to suck in the NFL after training camp. Then it was Jamar Chase couldn't catch the football because it didn't have white lines on it. And now we've got Treylon Burks not able to finish practice and he's got asthma and all these things. So if it follows that line of thinking, he's going to be a massive smash this year, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I like Treylon Burks a lot. But I mean, this would be a concern if it continues through training camp. Like if he's, if it's like a conditioning issue or whatever, like he's just having a hard time finishing practices. Like Vrabel does seem like the kind of guy who would not be into that. It's like you got to be out here working hard. Like it would cost him playing time. So I don't think it's like just like definitely a non-issue, but all this stuff that he needed to hit an inhaler or whatever was happening in May. Does feel like stuff that we'll kind of look back on and be like, oh, that was fun.
This was silly.
Yeah. Dude, there was a clip where Vrabel was like, I guess like a lineman got injured or something during practice. And like, he just yells to the whole team, like, why are you standing around? Let's move it down 10 yards and let's get this baby off the field. Let's go. Oh my gosh.
Rub some dirt on it.
It'll be good by the time you get married.
Moving on here, we'll talk about David Njoku. This happened a little bit last week, but he got a 4-year, $56.8 million extension. Austin, you've been in on David Njoku. We've seen these these tight ends take a little while to break out. He's an athletic freak. They moved on from Austin Hooper. We've got presumably Deshaun Watson in there this year. Is David Njoku becoming one of your favorite late round guys here?
Dude, I've had a soft spot for David Njoku going back, I think, 3 years. Time is hard these days with all that we've had to go through the last couple. But I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and I screenshotted a David Njoku update where it said David Njoku, who has moved into the tight end 1 conversation. And I remember circling that in the rainbow colored one and sending it to our League of Record group chat and being like, David Njoku is a tight end 1. Suck it, y'all, because I had just picked him up off the waiver. And then that next game, I can remember the fall where he fell upside down and he landed on his arm and he broke his hand. And I was like, well, there goes my tight end 1 that I just got for free. That sucks. And then Austin Hooper came over and had that fatty contract. People forget, though, David Njoku was a top prospect. Drafted in the first round, correct me if I'm wrong there, and he was looking really good until these unfortunate series of events has kind of diverted the way that we evaluate David Njoku because of the injury and then the additions at the tight end position. So this, though, he's still in his mid-20s. They just gave him a fatty deal. And they got rid of all their other pass catchers. Jarvis is gone. Amari Cooper is gone. I think David Njoku comes into the best situation he has in the last couple of years, and he's got the talent to actually make something of it. So, yeah, I'm stoked on David Njoku.
Yeah. I mean, I think he fits some of the bill like we're looking for. We want an athletic tight end. We want a decent offense. We want a good quarterback. So if Watson's on the field this year for him, I think that's a really good match for him to be a guy to throw a dart on.
And low-key, he targets the tight end a little bit more than you think he does. Like Fells was actually.
How do you know what I think he does?
Because I know you.
I fucking know
You're in my head, dude. So Scott, you're in the chat here asking about ETN. We have a segment on ETN here in a little bit, so we will definitely get to your question there. So hold that for just a second here. We're going to wrap through the rest of the news here. We've got some Packer news with Robert Tonyan, his knee. With his knee, he was limited OTAs. And then we have Packers wide receiver Christian Kirk getting some spotlight from his own offensive coordinator, Stanovich, who said Christian Watson will be a problem for opposing secondaries. Pat, you're a little bit lower on Christian Watson as well, I believe, from some of the pods I've heard you on, or maybe you can back up if you're not. Are you buying some of this? Because I also saw a little bit about his drops this in some practices too. So where are you at with Watson? Do you think it could happen this year or probably not?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm low on him actually, because I've taken him in like industry leagues where I got the sense like that I was taking him ahead of where he would have gone.
Oh, okay.
And then
why do you love him?
But also like he like scares me to hell. Like I just like he really does. Because I mean, you're really with Watson just betting on an athletic profile. And he like crazy efficient last year, but he was playing at an FCS school, and it's an FCS powerhouse. And like, yeah, I hope so. I hope you were crazy efficient if you're supposed to be like a borderline first round NFL talent. So, I guess I'm skeptical of like the mega upside cases for him, but like he's in such a good situation where all he has to be is Marcus Valdes-Scantling. That's all he has to be, because if he can, and Valdes-Scantling is quite good downfield, so that isn't like a super low bar, but he's not going to have to like be a true number one in the offense. He just has to be a field stretcher, because then they'll add screens and stuff to that. They'll scheme stuff for him as well. And I think we're probably going to be pretty excited about Watson coming out of the year, because like if he has 10 fantasy points a game, he's going to do it in a pretty exciting way. And people are going to be like, Christian Watson or like the 102 in rookie drafts. Like I think that he doesn't even have to be that good to get to that. So he's a kind of a classic type of guy where he scares me, but I'm making sure to have exposure. You don't want to like hard fade a guy like this, I don't think.
He's a classic type of guy.
Classic. Just the type
Austin just took him in our Dynasty League of Record, and he has just been like gushing. I mean, we're Packers fans too, so he is obviously like super into him, but also like Watson's just a fun one to really like because of the athletic profile, obviously, but also the opportunity sets up nicely. It might have been somebody on this panel had said that he could have the Chase Claypool-esque rookie season, which I think would be maybe not that many touchdowns, but who knows with Rodgers? I mean, you got a touchdown upside for days, but I could see that happen there, like something like that.
I think that's totally realistic, because like Claypool took a while to get on the field, and then like remember Tomlin was like he's hitting the rookie wall, and it was like that's only because you're not playing in this.
You put the wall there.
So it wasn't even like this.
Those are the biggest walls to overcome, man.
It's like in front of ourselves.
So I don't think that's like overly optimistic that he could have that kind of season. And like we were very excited about Claypool. I still think Claypool's very good, even despite like a somewhat disappointing follow-up to that season, because he looks so good as a rookie.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you thought he was good because you watched his TikTok videos. And I was going to be like, okay.
TikTok scouting.
Yeah, TikTok scouting. Exactly.
Yeah, it's what you got to do these days.
Thanks.
All right, well, that wraps up the news and notes. Obviously, there was a ton of it there, but we had to get through some of the stuff that, it's fun to get these mini takes here as we head into the offseason. But we want to talk a little bit about some of Pat's work here. Obviously, he does a lot for Dynasty rankings, and he's got an article that kind of goes through each of his rankings. That article's link is in the description below here. It's his positional and top 50 there. But we wanted to pull out a couple pieces of here, and I just loved what you said here about Kenny Pickett. A slight dig at him here. You said, "Welp, I hope you like low ceiling quarterbacks as much as the Steelers. After you went 20th in the NFL draft, it's impossible though not to rank Kenny Pickett as the Superflex QB1. And believe me, I've tried." So I just wanted to bring that one up there. I think it's a little bit funny, but I mean, an underwhelming class all the way around here, right, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, just a brutal blow to the quarterback class. We didn't the wide receiver class. We didn't really get, other than Justin Ross, who didn't get drafted at all. Basically, like everyone I was like kind of excited about did get drafted, and we even had some extra guys like Wan'Dale Robinson that we thought might be day 3, go day 2. So that was awesome. But then we have these quarterbacks, Malik Willis in particular, sliding to the 3rd round is a real bummer because for fantasy he has this really exciting upside profile. Even as a 2nd round pick, you'd be like, look, he's going to be Jalen Hurts. He's going to be out there sooner than later. But 3rd round, it's like such a gigantic gap in the franchise commitment. And Kenny Pickett, I think if he's absolutely terrible, they could move on. We have seen teams do that to mid to late 1st round picks. But as long as he's like
Cardinals with Josh
mediocre,
Rosen.
Yeah, Cardinals with Josh Rosen, great example. If he's mediocre to like poor, he'll get another shot. And in these super flex leagues, like just knowing that a guy's like almost certain to be a starter next year is so huge.
Pat, I just wanted to follow up on that subject and hear from you directly. What qualities do you look for the most for an incoming quarterback, mainly from the fantasy perspective, for a rookie who's coming in?
Well, I mean, rushing is obviously, the biggest thing. But then I think the ability to, first of all, scrambling is nice. Kevin Cole's done some really good research on that. And just like it actually makes a difference in real life that these guys scramble. But obviously that's also great for fantasy. And, we've seen, some of the work that he did was showing like, it's not enough to just like be athletic. Like scrambling shows you that these guys are actually looking to make plays with their legs, which was like a key thing with Mahomes, for example. And Pickett's actually a scrambler. Pickett, Corral, these guys, Howell, basically the whole class scrambles. So that's nice. But then I think deep throws are also nice to see. And, like how often you're attempting deep throws, how often you make really great deep throws. I was looking at PFF's big time throws on 20+ yard passes, which is something
Malik
that you
Willis.
see like Malik Willis is like, he like breaks the metric. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like, one of the things that we saw with Josh Allen. It's another thing, Mahomes was great at big time throws deep, particularly when under pressure. Mahomes would look to throw deep and was really good at throwing deep under pressure. So yeah, I think for fantasy, like if you just had a guy who can run around and hit throws deep, like you don't really even need anything else. I mean, Jalen Hurts would kind of be that guy, right? Like Jalen Hurts has plenty of warts as an NFL quarterback, but like he is a great rusher and he is looking to rush and he hits big plays downfield, and potentially with AJ Brown, that part of his game will really jump up another level. So that's probably the biggest things like that I think probably go like underemphasized. Like as fantasy players, we should probably emphasize big plays and rushing a lot more than like traditional scouting.
Love that.
Well, I want to follow up that, like, so in super flex leagues where you're doing that, do you think, and I probably know the answer to this because I'm like, you kind of laid it out there, but like Jalen Hurts is a guy that's kind of on the bubble. Like, we don't know if he's going to have the job, right? Like they keep saying like, he's kind of had this leash. So do you think like are you trying to at least pair your rushing quarterbacks with somebody that has really good job security, or do you kind of just cycle through them every year and you don't mind scouting every year to kind of do that in Dynasty?
No, I think the job security is massive, and that's something like Jalen Hurts actually I really struggled with entering last season. I had someone like ask me like, should I send a first for Jalen Hurts? And I was like, yes, you should, but like I understand why that like feels bad or risky, because it is risky. But you do have, I think with a guy like Hurts, it's like the payoff is so big because it's not just that you have this quarterback starting and filling that starting spot, which is kind of half the battle in Superflex, but he's actually giving you a point per game advantage over the guys that other people are starting. And so it's kind of like, I think, worth taking the risk a little bit more with a guy like Hurts. Hurts this year is someone that I would still be taking the risk with because like they just traded for AJ Brown. Like they're investing in this passing game. They could have taken a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round and did not. I mean, that's what they did to Carson Wentz. So for them not to do that, I think we're starting to see a little bit more of a commitment to Jalen Hurts, where last year really did feel like they were like, let's see how it goes.
Well, yeah,
this
and not
year
only
they seem kind of in.
Yeah, not only just AJ Brown, and I know we could pay whatever attention to like the Disneyland narrative, but AJ Brown seems to be a really good friend of Jalen Hurts, and I think that's something like to keep in mind if they're doing this trade. Then like maybe you're right, maybe the leash is getting longer here.
I believe he said you should trade for AJ Brown.
Oh yeah. Well, I what I find interesting, like I don't know what the hell the Eagles are doing, because to me it's very obvious that they have a quarterback in Hurts. Like he's the guy that they should move forward with. But like a lot of people, it seemed like last year they had to kind of be talked into it or kind of watch what he did and the development in order to be sold on him. And then, but even with that, they're still not 100% sold. So it is almost like that in the back of their minds. They're like, oh, well, next year we have a massive quarterback class. Like this year's was weak. Next year's supposed to be stacked. There's supposed to be a lot of talent, especially at the quarterback position. The Eagles have a lot of picks next year as well. So they're probably thinking to themselves like, all right, we're going to push it all in. We're going to give him everything he wants because he really says and thinks that he's a good quarterback. I believe he's a good quarterback. And then if he doesn't, then they're like, well, now we have all the pieces that we possibly need as far as picks go in order to get one of these top 5 quarterbacks that are going in the first next year. So I do think it is kind of a disservice to the player because you're indicating I'm all in, but it seems like a bluff. Right? Like you're sitting here being like, I don't think what you're trying to tell me is actually true, that you actually believe in Hurts, because you're indicating all of your arguments and actions up until trading for AJ Brown has been like, oh, wishy-washy on Hurts. And it's,
well, Pat, you actually had a point a few podcasts ago about the Bears and the Jets and how they're doing it in opposite ways. Kind of the Eagles are doing it now, and how you can drop in a quarterback essentially if you do it the way the Jets have done it. So if Zach Wilson sucks, then the next year you move on, you drop in like another quarterback. I think the Eagles could be in a way to set up, but I do think that's like the smarter way to do it than otherwise like try to rise above your circumstances.
Yeah, 100%. And like you see, like with Tyreek Hill. He was like, I was never going to the Jets. Like, come on. Like, but you don't want to be that franchise that a player is like, no. Yeah. And especially if it's a quarterback, that's how they're going to.
It's funny that he went to the Dolphins and he's like, I would never go to the Jets. Like, what does that say about the Jets, man?
Yeah. But like, all of these perceptions they change pretty quickly. Like, it wasn't that long ago that would have been the attitude about the Bills, and it's like you can kind of shift these things. So if all of a sudden the Jets have these 2 really dynamic pass catchers in Moore and Garrett Wilson, and Zach Wilson just absolutely stinks. Yeah, like you can attract meanwhile, the Bears, if Justin Fields has a bad season, the Bears are not going to be able to attract like Baker Mayfield or whatever, or the Baker Mayfield next year's Baker Mayfield equivalent.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good point.
So we talked a little bit about Sky Moore at the top a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, because after Sky Moore landed at the Chiefs, initially I'm sure you're jacked, and then maybe in Dynasty long term you're like really excited. But with that room being as crowded, I mean, how much did that change your outlook of Sky Moore this year with all the additions that they did in the wide receiver room, Pat?
I mean, from a Dynasty perspective, it doesn't really. I mean, it's good. Like in Dynasty, it's only good. I think, the CeeDee Lamb landing spot, right? Mm-hmm. Like, remember when he went to Dallas, and rightly, by the way, the community was like stoked because it's like, I don't care. In a couple years, they'll probably trade Amari Cooper, which is exactly what happened. And, he'll eventually be better than Michael Gallup. And, he is. So, like, I think the big thing we just want to pay attention to here is like he is going to play with Patrick Mahomes for the next 4 seasons at a minimum. And is the target competition like so bad that, it's going to prevent a really good player from breaking out? Like the question with all these rookies is just how good are they? That's all it comes down to, really. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, you're okay. You're not amazing. And yeah, if he's not amazing, then it might be a bit of a problem, might be kind of a thorn in his side that he's got to deal with Juju Smith-Schuster stealing targets and, MVS winning downfield so much better than he can. But if he's really good, then he's not going to have any trouble taking over mid-season as kind of the guy in like the intermediate area over the prove it deal Juju. And I don't think that MVS's game and his are similar at all. Sky Moore's like biggest weakness is that he doesn't win deep, and he's much more of a guy you'd hit on kind of like a crossing route over the middle, and then he gets you a bunch of yak rather than like a downfield guy. So to me, like playing with MVS for the next couple seasons is a plus. You want a Chiefs offense that can stretch the field. MVS most likely is going to be what he was with the Packers and be a very effective field stretcher, which is always good for an NFL offense. Like I don't want an NFL offense that has like nothing going on and a wide receiver I like. I want a dynamic offense and then a wide receiver I like in it. So I'm not like overly concerned, but certainly like if he is a mediocre player at the next level, he'll get exposed as that mediocre player more quickly.
Well, I like that you pointed out the intermediate success too, because now if we see Travis Kelce decline in the next couple of years, not saying that'll happen, but I mean, he's getting up there in age, then you see a path for Sky Moore to actually get more of that volume off of Kelce in the coming years there. So that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so we pulled a chart. I didn't get who did this for you, but basically it took your top 50, I think, and then compared it to ADP. And we wanted to point out some of the guys that are different here, as you can see on the screen here if you're watching here. But it was funny because when we started the show sheet for this, Pat, I had listed, just from listening to you on the podcast, I'd listed players I know you're high on and knew you're low on. And then I saw the chart and I was like, yep, okay, it checks out. So it kind of lined up perfectly here. But, you know, I wanted to give it to the panel here. We'll start with Austin on some of the things they noticed with your rankings versus ADP here.
Yeah, the one that stood out to me was a couple, but the first one was Tyler Algier above Dameon Pierce by 4 spots with an inverted ADP. I was looking at these guys, and they look like to be in similar situations, opportunity-wise, but I would love your take on putting Tyler ahead of Dameon.
It comes down to the profile for me with Tyler Algier, where he's a bigger back, 224, ran a 4.6, so not super fast, but had really good breakaway numbers in college. And he's like a guy who gets up to speed fairly quickly, and then he's tough to bring down. And that's like exactly the type of back that should succeed in this offense. I mean, the Falcons are like slowly becoming a joke as like this, you know, junkyard version of the Titans. They've got Marcus Mariota. They've got what's the tight end they just brought in that was from the Titans? And Ferkser. They have Ferkser. Yeah, and then they literally
and Austin Hooper. They traded for Austin Hooper.
Well, Hooper went to the Titans actually.
Yeah.
They just brought in a receiver too that was on the Titans, some depth receiver.
Oh,
no, it was Jeremy McNichols. So like they literally are taking all these cast off parts of the Titans, trying to assemble this like much worse version. And in that much worse version, I think he can kind of be much worse Derrick Henry. So, you know, you kind of have like, and there's a ton of opportunity. Mike Davis had 197 opportunities, carries plus targets last year. He did nothing with them, just absolutely brutal yards per target, yards per carry. So Algier, I think, has like a pretty low bar for what he needs to do efficiency-wise, which will probably be not great because their offensive line stinks. But like he can be like just kind of regular poor as opposed to like league worst in terms of efficiency and have some pretty nice production. And then from a dynasty perspective, like we're going to be looking around next year and be like, who are these young running backs that can take another step forward and kind of take over a backfield? Playing with a Cordell Patterson, who's going to be, I believe, entering his age 32 season in 2023. I mean, going to be pretty easy to make that upside case if he has like a solid rookie year and it's like clearly their lead back heading into next season. Pierce is really tough for me because he was a committee back. He was good on a per touch basis, a really good touchdown scorer, but I'm worried they're going to continue to run a committee there. And that's kind of why I'm just like having trouble getting quite as excited about Pierce, like getting a shot is like the clear lead back in that backfield. But
I don't have the stats in front of me, but Lovie Smith feels like a guy who can give it to one back though. Like I feel like if Dameon Pierce wins it out, like Matt Forte, right? Like
and
Matt Forte was part of it. I mean,
That's
obviously
true.
maybe not the same player, but I think if Dameon Pierce wins out, plus the draft capital edges in Pierce's favor too, right?
Yeah, it's a 4th to a 5th, I think.
Yeah, so that would be my kind of counterpoint to that. Pierce just
that's fair.
feels. I know he's like low volume, but he just feels funner. Like he feels like
he's supposed to be strong.
Yeah, like he gets me a little more jacked, I think, than Tyler Algier did.
I love that Algier was a linebacker though. Also,
he was a converted linebacker. Yeah, it's kind of a fun.
What's
story.
the numbers on that?
I believe he had a sack. Very good. Very good hurry to conversion rate.
I meant like, have we seen this before? Have any famous
Javonte Williams played linebacker?
Okay,
there you go. He's
in high school.
He can see the holes and he hits them hard.
It makes sense.
I mean, most players in high school play both.
That was the joke. That was what I was getting at there. But.
But yeah, I mean, like taking Dameon Pierce over Algier, I think is totally fine. It's more about like, and the draft capital stuff. Like to me, it's like your day 3. Your day 3. Like it's not. I don't think 4 or 5. That stuff really matters. I mean, 4 or 7 probably matters, but like 4 or 5. So it's to me like you're in this range. The way this year's draft class goes is like this is pretty flat. You know, if you like Pierce more, like take Pierce.
So I wanted another philosophy question because you talked about draft capital just now. I was thinking about this and like just the way the league has changed and the way they value running back. Do we think that draft capital is going to change in the next couple of years, like the value of draft capital with running backs, Pat?
Yeah,
I wonder if it already has. I mean, like, you know, like I guess last year, right, we had Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne go first rounds. Breece Hall feels like maybe 10 years ago he would have been a first round pick or something. And it's weird to me. I don't really see like why. You know, like Hall's like a very good prospect. So if like Najee Harris is going first round, why is Breece Hall not going first round? But he also doesn't feel that different than Dalvin Cook, who was a second round pick. So or Joe Mixon, who's a second round pick, although maybe some off the field stuff knocked him out of the first era. But I feel like it's been a few years where we've seen kind of this transition, and we're probably done with like, you know, the Todd Gurley in the top 10 and the Zeke Elliott in the top 10 stuff.
Saquon.
Yeah.
Saquon. Yeah. Maybe I'm being too optimistic about the NFL here.
I think we just summed it up by just saying those names and then we figure it out.
Pat, I heard you say that you drafted Malik in a pre-NFL draft at 101 that you did.
No, I saw him go.
Oh, yeah, I thought you did
not.
That. Well, then I know that you've been high on Malik, and I wanted to ask after his, you know, landing spot, how much that has changed your outlook on him, because obviously, you know, he's not a lock to start, probably not this year, and then we'll see what happens with Tannehill and his contract.
Yeah, I mean, he has to come way down. I'm still like above market on him, and I actually took him in a league, in a 14-team league. I took him at the first round, second pick, or the first pick of the second round, and then immediately was able to trade him as a piece to get Jonathan Taylor back. So I'm not above, moving him. Yeah, I did.
I gotta get JT back.
Traded Brees, traded Willis and some picks, and got JT coming back. So
there you go.
Yeah, I think, you know, that shows maybe that I'm not the only one who's into Malik Willis after he fell to the third round, but I still like him as kind of that, like after that tier break, I have him at the 111 in these rankings. And to me, there's like kind of a tier break in, you know, probably after Olave, frankly, but you could say Pickens is maybe like in his own little mini tier with Pickett or something. But after that, I'm like, okay, so I've got to bet on this really boom bust wide receiver or a boom bust quarterback who won't get playing time as quickly. But like, I mean, we know which one is going to carry more value if he actually hits. I mean, a lot more value. So, you know, I was on the clock at the 110 in a super flex where like we're totally set at quarterback, would have taken Watson over Willis, you know, so I think that's fine to do, but we ended up trading off it. But yeah, I think, you know, Willis, it's tough to like paint out the exact scenario where, it works out amazing. I guess it's probably the Titans miss the playoffs and they see what they have in Willis, but maybe that's next year instead of this year and you're holding him for a while. But I do think when he gets on the field, because of the type of profile he has, where he is such a willing rusher, obviously the type of guy that they're going to install some running plays for. Also in Tennessee, like, he will be a guy who rolls out of the pocket. He will be a guy that's asked to throw deep, asked to throw a lot of play action passes. Like, it's going to suit his skill set pretty well when he gets a chance. And I think with a 3rd round pick, he does eventually get that chance. So you're probably banking some value. It's probably like trading something for like a 2024 first or something, which, you might not want to do. You might be kind of pushing more in for now. But yeah, I do think at some point we're going to see him on the field and people are going to get excited.
I do too. And piggybacking off of the quarterback situation in your rankings here, Matt Corral over Desmond Ridder. What should we be expecting out of Matt Corral?
I think we're going to be seeing him as the Carolina starter sooner than later. Yeah. I mean, Darnold's terrible. So how does it not happen? Like, Matt Rule is, probably the first coach fired. So he's got to know that.
Yeah.
So, okay, they're 0-3. Corral's not starting the next game. Like, I just think he's getting on the field real quick. And I think Ridder might have one. I think Mariota is just going to be better. Mariota's not like hot garbage the way Darnold is. So that it's tougher for him to get on the field. And I just like Corral more as a prospect, frankly.
That's a good, interesting point on Mariota. It's like he'll be lukewarm and he won't like excite you, but he's not going to probably ruin everything for you either. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Johnny, you noticed some stuff with Jelani Woods here as well out of the rankings.
Yeah, I noticed that your biggest difference is Jelani Woods from ADP to your particular rankings. Is there anything that you're hearing about Jelani, or any particular reason why?
Why do you hate Jelani?
Yeah,
why
do you hate him so much that you would put him down?
Say it.
So Mike Leone was messaging me about this, and I did kind of bump him up in my own rankings of like where I was drafting these guys. I was like, okay, like, you're right. I probably should take Jelani Woods over, Ty Chandler or whatever. But guess what? I'd still take Jeremy Ruckert first. My thing with Jelani Woods is he wasn't a pass catcher for basically his entire career. Then as a 5th-year senior,
he's got the cheat code.
The athleticism.
Well, no, he was a quarterback. He was a quarterback for a long time, and he got recruited as a quarterback to Oklahoma State. And then he didn't get on the field, transferred to Virginia, and Virginia was like, you're a big-ass dude who is just an athlete. We're going to put you at tight end. And so then he went to tight end and picked up the position. That's how – but, yeah, so that's why it's like I think it's always interesting when you bring in these tight ends that have these, like, potential dual eligibility on, like, these wild – you never know, if
Johnny's putting his Sean Payton hat on and wishing.
I'm just saying,
like, this is my Taysom Hill project right here.
I'm just saying he's like 6'7", 260, 270. That dude is massive, and he runs like a 4.4 something.
I think he has the highest relative athletic score among
ever.
Yes.
Ever. Yeah.
And
that's
good indicator.
I prefer guys who are
that's exciting, but
generally at the tight end position. I like them to catch passes. There's like two different positions that you're playing. Like an NFL, he could be an awesome NFL tight end. I mean, Mo Alley Cox is kind of an example of this. It's like Mo Alley Cox is a giant human who like certainly could catch passes, but mostly blocks, and he's like good enough at that, and that's kind of his role. Like, I guess like he had a 14% yardage share in this Virginia season, which was like his only season as a pass catcher. Like Daniel Bellinger had a 15% career yardage share. Like he was catching passes over, his whole career. Like that's just more interesting. By the way, Bellinger, great athlete, shows up with the Giants.
He was
starting Ricky Seals-Jones this year. Ricky Seals-Jones is not good. We know that. Like Bellinger could be the starting tight end for the Giants for the last like 6 games of the season. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're getting excited about him after the year. Like, I don't know. Jelani Woods, I understand, very athletic, but the Colts have run a tight end by committee for years now with this coaching staff. They also have Kyle Granson, who is like a pass-catching kind of move tight end guy. They drafted in the 4th round last year. Didn't embarrass himself as a rookie. Didn't really flash much, but I would expect that he is involved over the next couple years. And And, again, I just think like Woods I care a lot more about the pass catching profile than the athleticism. The athleticism to a point. Like if a guy's a terrible athlete, Jalen Weidemeyer or whatever, like that's a bummer, man. Like, you're not going to be a fantasy star. But, the guys who are sufficiently athletic and showed more as a pass catcher, I'm just going to be a lot more interested in.
Before we move fully off of Dynasty here, talk a little bit of redraft before we head out. I wanted to ask if you had any best practices, maybe one best practice or personal tip that you'd like to share with
a little nugget.
Yeah, just the dynasty heads out there that are going to try and get into it this year.
I mean, I guess the big thing for me, like philosophically, is like just when you're looking at the players on your roster, just ask yourself, what if you're wrong? Because I think you have a very strong bias that like you have these guys, you pick them for a reason. Like these are your favorite players for the most part. And you're higher than market on these guys, like almost by default. That's how they ended up on your team. So you're probably going to have rose-colored glasses on for a number of these players. But the key to winning in Dynasty is to have a roster chock full of players who, after the season, everyone wants. They want to be trade. You're getting trade offers. You're getting peppered with trade offers all the time. So that's like the easiest way to make sure that you're in that position is to go like, okay, I think that the market's completely wrong on this guy. I think he's going to crush this year. But what if it does? What if he doesn't? Then does the bottom fall out? Because like let's say that guy's Javonte Williams. You're like, I'm not worried about Melvin Gordon at all. I think he's going to crush. Javonte Williams doesn't crush this year. You're still totally fine. Right? Like there's lots of guys who are insulated. So you can figure out guys who you like and are insulated. Those are like the perfect guys to make bets on.
I love this. I love this way,
That's
like the thought experiment of just like going through the counter narrative. What if I am wrong? Which I most assuredly we all will be on a lot of takes this year. All right, let's move on to some redraft talk here. Pat, on a recent show, you were talking about Travis Etienne. I wanted to play this clip for Whisper Nation here to talk a little bit about Etienne afterwards. So we'll get this going here, and then the power of television.
My first player is Travis Etienne. He's one of these running backs who goes in a range in these drafts that you can kind of do anything with. Like if you want to basically go zero running back, you got a late pick. You can get him in the late fifth round. So, maybe not technically a zero running back drafting a running back in the late fifth, but kind of like Miles Sanders a few years ago when he was a rookie. You get him in that range. You can often find like a breakout running back type in that late fifth range who, kind of serves as like a very weak anchor running back or kind of the premium zero running back type of build. But if you want to go with like the superhero build, I think Etienne can be a part of that. You take an early running back, you get Etienne as one of two running backs. You can wait a long time for your third running back. Or if you wanted to take 3 in the first 5, just tackle on one more, kind of do a classic hyperfragile. He really fits those builds. So for me, like just kind of where Etienne's going in that late fifth range. And after Breece Hall, he just kind of fits with a lot of draft builds, which is one reason that I like taking him a lot. But the other thing is that like it feels like you get kind of the post-hype sleeper with Travis Etienne. I thought he was a better prospect than Najee Harris. I thought he was a better prospect than Javonte Williams. I think he was a better prospect than Breece Hall. And you're getting him after Hall in drafts. You're getting him way after Williams in drafts. Getting him way after Najee Harris in drafts. Now, I get why. I mean, we've got the injury concern. We, potentially have James Robinson lurking. But that James Robinson injury is like, I'm okay fading a quick comeback with the Achilles stuff.
So I love this clip, first of all, but we had a couple questions from it. So the first is about Travis Etienne. The second is about team builds. We'll start with the latter. You mentioned hero or superhero RB, zero RB, hyperfragile. We've seen all these like phrases talked about. I just wanted to also in your Twitter bio, you said you've never drafted an RB. Can you give us your top level take on kind of team build philosophies and like, all these different, team builds that you mentioned here?
Yeah, I would recommend Pete Overzet did a really good video on kind of all these strategies and breaking them down like in really good detail on YouTube. But I think they really all come down to like limiting the amount of like dollars that you're putting in. Like if you think of like an auction draft, like you just want to limit how many of your dollars that you're spending on the running back position. And there's like a million ways that you can do that. Like if you don't take a bunch of running backs early, or any running backs early, let's say in the first 5 rounds, then you probably want to take like, 3-4 guys in kind of like the 7 to 12 range, let's say. And then, tackle on a couple lotto ticket type of guys. That would be like a 0 running back build. Hyper fragile is like, it seems like the opposite of that, but it's actually very similar, where in hyper fragile, you're taking like 3 in the first 5 running backs, but then you're only taking 4. And if like you want to get real weird with it, you could just take those 3 in a type of, in like the drafters best ball tournament where it's total points for the whole season. Like that type of build has had some appeal to me, where like you just take those 3 and then you're making the bet like these are the 3 guys that you needed to have this year. And because I already have those guys, then I'm just going to go find points elsewhere. And, the running back position tends to have a lot of busts. It tends to have some guys that really crush. And so I think for that reason, the strategies that limit the amount of the like total draft capital that you're putting into the running back position, which means limiting how many early picks you're spending on them, end up being consistently profitable strategies. Here, running back is probably like the easiest one and one of the most consistently profitable. Great best ball strategy, great redraft strategy. You just take 1 in the first 2 rounds. You kind of build your team around the bet that this guy is going to go off. This guy is going to have like the legendary season, the season that makes kind of everyone remember like, oh yeah, that was the Jonathan Taylor season like last year was, or whatever. So superheroes is just, you take 2, usually you start running back, or you maybe take a wide receiver sandwiched in round 2 and you take one in round 3. And that strategy did awesome last year because the second round running backs stayed healthier than they typically do, and they scored a bunch of points. There's just a really high hit rate. Wide receivers in that range, not so great. Wide receivers just after that, awesome. So if you were kind of done at running back at that point, and you're just, you're hitting Kupp, you're hitting Debo, you're hitting Chase. So, the strategies are going to vary very much like the results are going to vary a lot based on how the ADP sets up with the particular breakouts of that season. But kind of all these strategies are like different flavors, I think, of a similar philosophy, which is that, you want to figure out ways to get upside at the running back position without overspending in terms of your team draft capital.
I love that breakdown, Pat. Thanks for sharing this. And the second question, speaking of high upside running backs here, is about Travis Etienne. You like him a lot as a post-hype sleeper, mentioned above, and had him pegged as a better prospect than last year's Najee Harris and Javonte Williams, as well as this year's top prospect at the running back position, Breece Hall. Etienne is coming in ADP-wise behind all of those guys. This is a bit spicy, and we love it. College prospect aside, how confident are you in Etienne fantasy-wise coming into his sophomore season?
Well, I mean, the college prospect's the only thing we have. So
I mean, now college prospects aside, yes, he's so great, but coming in this year off of the injury, with the new coach, this is the situation in Jacksonville with this team. Yeah, what do you feel about him there?
So I think the situation isn't great. Obviously, the team could suck, so that's never good. Yeah. But I think it's not terrible because you have. One, I mean, he's playing with his former college quarterback, which I think is pretty nice, particularly because that quarterback just had to suffer through a year of Darrell Bevell as his OC and Urban Meyer just completely mailing in an NFL season. One of the craziest things we've ever seen. So now the new coaches, like, they're incentivized not just to have a good season, but to like have a very different offense in look and feel to the one that was just there last year, which I think will mean that they're trying to get some, easy completions for Trevor Lawrence, which one of the easiest ways you think to do that is, hey, you have this guy who like basically profiles as an Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift type, who you have a ton of, you already have this great rapport with. Let's get him, some screens, some, I know like the tropes that he's going to play out of the slot and stuff, but that's not even what I mean. It's like, it's more just about like, they're going to have a lot of plays where you've got an outlet with Travis Etienne, and he is explosive after the catch, really nice yards per out run in college. And breaks a ton of tackles and then picks up yards after. he's not the type of guy, like his profile doesn't suggest that he'll ever be like a workhorse type, but that DeAndre Swift profile can be a fantasy superstar. And so in a way, like a slightly reduced workload, James Robinson splitting the backfield with ETN doesn't really scare me.
And to build on that point, didn't Trevor Lawrence lead the NFL in checkdown throws last season as well? So, and they've already got the relationship.
I mean, he didn't have anyone else to really throw to last year.
Now he's got Christian Kirk. So
yeah, now he's got Christian.
Oh,
Kirk.
yeah.
I don't know that like their deep threats are Marvin Jones and Zay Jones. Like he's going to have plenty of opportunities to check down this year. Right. Those guys aren't going to be cooking corners.
Well, and I think Doug Peterson's offense has always been one that funnels some passes to the running back as well. Like they've been. Now you could talk about Peterson thing has been like it's been a cycle. Like he hasn't given a lot of carries to a lot of guys. But maybe the philosophy is we want grinders on first and second down, and we want our Travis Etiennes, especially in PPR, to be the red zone guys, be the pass catching guys, that Alvin Kamara-esque.
And we haven't said it yet, but Travis Etienne just came out the last couple of days saying he would love to be used like Deebo Samuel was last year.
Oh, wouldn't we all?
Yeah, he's still got fire in the brain.
Yeah, it's like he's seeing how much he's about to get paid, and he's like, "Yeah, I'd like to get that kind of usage."
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, when Deebo himself is saying he doesn't want to be played this way, and then you get an ETN coming in like, I will. So like, cool.
Yeah.
Like that's exciting.
Because ETN's actually a running back.
Well,
So.
how about that?
Order, maybe running backs are incentivized to actually play more like Deebo because they'll get a bigger contract, whereas Deebo will probably get hurt if he continues to play like that. Playing the business aspect against the GMs. We'll see how that plays out, I guess. Before we send you off here, Pat, I wanted to talk a little bit about Best Ball. I know that Ship Chasers, you guys are doing a ton there. We've got the links in the description below, so go check them out, Whisper Nation. I was curious if you could share like your 3 most important rules when Best Ball drafting.
I mean, the first one, I guess, would be, pay attention to structure, which doesn't just mean the running back stuff. I mean, I think you want to be thinking about, your quarterback strategy and your tight end strategy and trying to figure out, making sure you're doing things that make sense. One of the things that I probably screwed up last year is that like I wanted to draft a lot of 2 quarterback teams, but I would kind of push it probably a little bit too much with like the types of quarterbacks that were like, I was going like maybe I'd go like, Trevor Lawrence and I don't know, one of those other kind of quarterbacks in that's 11-12 range or something. And it's like those teams would have just been better with 3 quarterbacks. And I think just being the data tells us that like if you're waiting past a certain range with quarterback, you really probably should go with 3. I think even in these playoff tournaments, like where you've got, you need to win these playoff weeks that are like individual leagues just that week, that 3rd quarterback can help you advance. Mike Leone made the finals of the FFPC one. He timed out and took Ben Roethlisberger, and Roethlisberger actually like scored enough to get him through. And it was a team that like probably should have been built 3 quarterbacks, so it kind of worked out. But that's like I think making sure you got like all that stuff locked in. Like this is a 2 tight end build, this is a 3 quarterback build, this is a 5 running back build, but maybe I could do a 6th here. It's kind of a luxury type of 6th, or like no, I need the 6th, and I might need to push to 7. Like I think all that stuff is critical. And then, I think probably not reaching too much. I'm fine taking stands. I'm probably on the take the stand side of this than the diversify side of this. But I do, like to use ADP to help push me a little bit. Because the one thing that really stinks is like when you accidentally take a stand, you're like, I'm way underweight this guy. And it's I don't dislike him. So like what happens? So I think, letting the ADP guide you a little bit so that you end up like, spreading it out among guys that you actually like. And then I think the big thing this year, if you're playing like really any of the tournaments, the best ball tournaments, man, you got to focus on week 17 a lot. Like so much of this. Pete had another incredible video on this that came out today, actually, about like the expected value of week 17. It's like 500 times the expected value of like advancing to the playoffs in these tournaments. So like if your odds of getting a team to week 17 in one of these best ball tournaments is like so low. But if you show up there with this, like now you've got a DFS lineup basically. So if you show up with like this uncorrelated DFS lineup that like also like has a ton of similar players as everyone else, because like you weren't kind of thinking through different structures and stuff. And you're just kind of like, yeah, like, Derrick Henry went off against the Chargers and then the Texans in week 16. And you have like one of the many, many Derrick Henry teams. It doesn't look at all different from those teams, and it's not correlated. So you need a ton of things to go right.
Just to get it.
Yeah. You're like, am I just drawing dead? I won the lottery to get here. And now do I actually have a chance to take this thing down? I think you do want to put yourself in a position where if you win the lottery to get into one of these finals, you want to have a real bullet.
I like that.
Well, Hayden Winks came out with his study too, and he was talking about that, like just the difference in points. It went from like 160 all the way up to like 200 for the championship team in the points that they scored. So you really have to make that lineup the best it possibly can be, and I think that's kind of a good way to look at it.
Great points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pat, well, we appreciate you so much for being on the show. Let the people know where they can find you and what you guys are working on real quick.
Yeah, we're really ramping up at ship chasing. We're getting ready for a summer full of main events. We're going to be live drafting main events by mid-August, like 1 to 2 a week. And
Nice.
We'll be out in Vegas again doing live main events and stuff too. But yeah, there'll be a ton of content on ship chasing this summer, lots of drafting. So check that out. And then NBC Sports Edge Fantasy Guide will be out pretty soon. Have wrapped up all the stuff that I've been writing for that. Have a Dynasty strategy article on kind of like my strategy for accumulating Dynasty value and kind of my thoughts on that, as opposed to like the win now type stuff. Did an auction article, did a ton of team preview, player preview stuff. So we got you covered with all that. Dynasty rankings just got updated on the site. So you can check those out on the premium side. And I'll be working on some research articles on best ball pretty soon here. So check those out as well.
Well, we appreciate you, Pat. We'll have to do this again, and we appreciate all of Whisper Nation that was in the chat. We will see you guys next week. For Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travie. That's Austin Sear. Thanks, Pat. We're the Fantasy Whisperers. We're out of here. Peace.
Peace.
Hey, do you like mock drafts? We do too. You can come back every Monday and mock with us. Check out one of these videos and make sure you're liked and subscribed.